For instance, the police officers, they kill black men, like in South Carolina, when that police officer gunned down Walter Scott. In cold blood, just murdered him. And it was captured on camera. Of course, the people react to that situation. But we have to move beyond merely reacting to events as they unfold. We need to plan well ahead of time and fight to address issues like police brutality well ahead of the next crisis. We are in crisis management mode for the most part as a people. We organize around events as they unfold instead of having foresight, instead of planning well ahead of time and plotting out our course of action and not just hopping from event to event to event to event. Because at the end of the day, people get riled up around one police event and then they go back to sleep. And then the next thing you know, the next black man or woman is killed by these police. And the process repeats itself and nothing happens to improve the situation. So we have to move beyond this reaction mode and get more into a planning mode. So that's one of the key points that he talked about in the book. He also talked about how miseducation leads to division. Like a lot of times you have these churches, for example. He talked about how you have all these different denominations. You may have multiple churches on one block in a community, but the churches don't work together to address the issues. Instead of consolidating their resources and working together for social uplift, they're divided and, each is doing their own thing. And even worse, there may be some tension in some situations or competition. And nowadays, like many of these churches, they're not about uplifting the community. All they're about is uplifting their pockets, getting jets that cost over $70 million. Living in lavish mansions. That's what they're concerned about, uplifting their bank account and their status instead of the community that they claim to care about. So that's one of the issues that he talks about. He talks about many more issues, but I will just conclude by talking about one other issue that he raises, and that's with respect to historically black colleges. And it epitomizes this whole problem of miseducation. He talked about how at that time, many of the black colleges were headed and run by whites. And many of these white people that ran the black colleges, they didn't even interact with African Americans. They didn't have African Americans over their house too much. They didn't treat them like equal people or even consider them equal. But yet they were placed in charge of running African American institutions. I mean, it's like they actually placed somebody in charge of these institutions that doesn't even regard African Americans as equals. So that was the situation way back then. But even today, you have African Americans who are in charge that don't have a knowledge of themselves. So they're not pushing African American history. They're not pushing entrepreneurship. They're not pushing an agenda or an education system designed to empower their people. So I wanted to just, briefly talk about that. Also, this book talks about the whole entertainment issue. He talked about how African Americans were pushed towards being minstrels when it comes to entertainment and not being pushed towards more dignified types of roles. And the same thing is happening today. we see that the most popular programs are programs that promote negative stereotypes about African American people. We have all these reality programs that depict African Americans as savages, basically. You have black women fighting each other, cursing each other out. You have black men who are irresponsible, who don't take care of their families, and that don't behave like men. You know, instead of behaving like men, they behave like boys. So this is the popular image that's put out here for us, for black people to consume. One of the most popular shows on television is celebrating the homosexual lifestyle, pushing that homosexual agenda on the community. And another one promotes the whole Negro bedwench phenomenon. I'm here to tell you, man, it's just sad that, you know, many of the problems that Carter G. Woodson talked about so long ago are still relevant and still exist today. So I'm going to do a part two, just elaborating on some points that were made in the book by Carter G. Woodson. We often hear this slogan about how African Americans need to do for self. It is very easy to spout slogans and to just say that we need more African American businesses. Everyone knows that that's what we need. If you go to any major city in this country where there's a predominantly black population, you will see that most of the businesses in those communities are controlled by people who do not live in the community, people who are not of the community. And this doesn't happen with any other group for the most part. You will see even immigrant groups that come to this country. They establish businesses in their community and in other people's communities. Like here in Maryland, you'll see Hispanic communities where they have businesses set up that are in Spanish language. You know, they offer their titles to their businesses are in Spanish. Their menus or you know, the language that's used in the business is Spanish. Um, so they have, you know, they provide for their basic needs. Every type of business that they need in their community, they set up in their community. The same is true for Arabs. If you go to, for instance, the Dearborn area in Michigan, you will see Arabic writing on the businesses. You will see that they have imprinted their presence in that area. They own many types of businesses in that community. It's a thriving community. And obviously, that's exactly what we need to do in a black community. It makes no sense for us not to control the businesses in our community. But the bigger question is, how do we go about doing this? And I'm interested in people putting out books that explain to the African American community exactly how you go about establishing businesses. How do you obtain the necessary capital to get started? What practical steps can one take in order to set up a business? That's what I would like to hear more of. And it would have been helpful if we had that in this book by Carter G. Woodson. We need practical solutions to these problems. Talking about the problem is great, but we need to talk more about how to correct that problem. So I'm more interested in that. Also, I wanted to talk about, like, what is the real impact of businesses in the black community? Like, how will establishing businesses actually benefit the masses of the people. And I think that on a practical level, it will obviously benefit people. Like if you have a black community and you have black businesses, they are likely to hire African Americans in those communities. They provide jobs and resources to the community. And hopefully those businesses will reinvest in the community that they serve. They will give to charities in the community. And the money will continue to circulate within that community, thereby enriching that community. But often we see African Americans who get rich and they set up businesses and all that kind of stuff. But often African Americans as a group, as a collective, do not benefit from the wealth that these individuals generate. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. Like, I know that Jay-Z has done some things, like he's helped bail out protesters here in Baltimore. He's done other kinds of charity, and he's done a lot of business work. He's recently established Tidal, this important music provider company. I don't know all the details about the company, but I do know one thing. Despite all this talk about how, these white businesses are trying to undermine him, the fact of the matter is his company employed an all-white staff. So if you have black business owners who do not hire African Americans to work for their businesses, that doesn't benefit the black community. That's no different from these foreign companies coming to our communities and not hiring us. Just because you have black millionaires, that doesn't necessarily translate into black power for the masses of black people. It doesn't necessarily mean that. We have many millionaires who, once they get their money, they forget about the community. And that again goes back to miseducation. They are so miseducated that once they acquire wealth, they don't give back to the community. They don't give back in charity. And in fact, they completely abandon the community. They completely disassociate from the community. And the first thing that these black successful men do often is get them a white woman and leave their black community behind. And, that's just tragic. And then again, that wealth doesn't stay in the black community. It goes outward. And so black capitalism is not necessarily an answer to all the problems that we face as a people. But I understand Carter G. Woodson's point. And basically, he said that, there's no revolution coming anytime soon. So in the meantime, you have to deal with the realities of living in a capitalist society. And the way you deal with that reality is by setting up businesses and doing for yourself.